I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Inside Track, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry. I'm delighted to announce that the Inside Track podcast has recently been recognised as one of the top 20 podcasts in its field. This is great recognition to all involved in putting the series together. I'm always amazed at how open my guests have been and how willing they are to share their experience. Without them, this show would not exist. So once again, a great big shout out and thank you to all of my guests. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Willis. Adam recently joined the Transformation Leaders Hub, and from our very first engagement with him, I was drawn to his natural yet direct style. I'm sure you'll enjoy our conversation today. Let me introduce him to you now. Well, thanks, Adam. Thanks for agreeing to join us today. As we always do on these podcasts, we start off with, I suppose, setting up the context of our upcoming conversation. So can you just briefly give us a summary of your background and your experience and I suppose how you transitioned into the world of change and transformation?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in financial services and recently fintech firms for the last 20 years. So straight out of college, first job was a cashier at my local HSBC branch. And over the years, I've taken on different roles, worked through lots of different operational roles. And my transition into transformation really came from working at Lehman Brothers, which I know isn't a very popular bank for different reasons. I would like to caveat it that it wasn't to me. I didn't take it down. But when they went into administration, we started working with the administrators that came in, and they were primarily looking at it from a project or a program perspective. And I started to take notice of what they were doing, and actually didn't seem like a million miles away from the work that I was doing, even though, we were introducing new software all the time and introducing new processes. We just hadn't wrapped it up into some sort of a project methodology, and started working closely with them, learning from them. And that made me realize that was the sort of work that I wanted to get into. I wanted to move away from the operations and the administration role, not that anything wrong with it, but I'd done 10 years at that point, and start to go into that transformation. So started at the very bottom of the transformation work, started in the change management team, and over the years built up in terms of going from small projects to more complex projects to then managing programs and then managing large transformational programs. And that's taken me really, up to where I am now. And thinking back, those years from Lehman Brothers seemed like a lifetime ago, but that was actually, for me, that was a real pivotal point in my career and a real learning experience for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's a similar background to mine. I started in banking and worked through operational banking roles, and then got the opportunity to get involved in a transformation exercise that we brought McKinsey's in to advise on the structure and the ways of working. But then a whole group of us from within the bank came together to lead some of the projects, and that was my transition from operating into transformation myself. And but I think the discipline, what I found, the discipline that you have within banking in operating that regulatory world and that sort of need for process, it's almost quite a natural transition into managing projects and managing change and managing in large-scale transformations. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, definitely. And I also find that having been in the administration side of things, that when we are delivering projects, I'm always very mindful of, well, what does that mean to the people that are doing the actual job? Because I've done that before, and I know what it feels like when someone introduces change. And administration jobs, they are very process-driven, they're very structured, and that really benefited me when I became a project manager and then became a program manager, and that I've always tried to apply a structure to what I'm doing, a logical structure, so that in an environment that is ever changing and sometimes uncertain, I'm very clear on what I'm doing, and I can use those tools to navigate that uncertainty. So I definitely find that's a benefit, and I haven't really thought about it like that before.
Right. Interesting. One of the questions that we always ask, again, just to put everything into context, but how do you define transformation? Because there's so many different definitions out there.
Yeah, I know. I've read a lot about evolution and the caterpillar to the butterfly. And actually, interestingly, at the moment for our kids at home, we've had to get caterpillars in to show them what it means to turn into a butterfly. But I think for me, it's probably, I see it as a little bit simpler than that. I see it as improvement through change, and it can be the change can be. It might not be a huge evolution like a caterpillar into a butterfly. It could be a small thing like improving the process. But actually, for the person doing that job, that's a huge transformation that can improve their day-to-day role. It could be something that improves the client experience, especially for banks. But it can go all the way up to organisational restructuring. It can be, at the moment I'm working on creating new legal entities for banks, and that's a huge transformation. But it's still done to improve where they are at the moment. And that's really how I view projects or view transformation.
And which roles have you most enjoyed? Is there been a consistent theme on the ones that you've enjoyed, or is it you actually enjoyed the variety?
To start off with, I think I was really grateful to be doing something different where I could take my experience from administration and look at it and say, well, if I had the opportunity, or now have the opportunity to improve things, how would I go about improving it, and how would I work with the business to deliver that? And I think that I've really enjoyed that side where I can make someone's day-to-day job, which is very structured, an improvement, make it a bit more enjoyable, and really enjoy working with people. But recently, having moved up into more complex programs, I started working with senior management and understanding their vision and their strategy. And I really enjoy working with them to help define their strategy and sometimes help them get to the point where they actually know what their strategy is. And then use the tools that I've built up over the years of working in program management to implement that, to make that work, and how that vision and that strategy can actually impact, again, going back to those people doing the administrative roles, maybe not just the first layer of management, but all the way down, and seeing how that can improve the company, but also improve employees' experience.
That's great. And I think the key thing there is that understanding, that putting yourself in the shoes of as you said, the administration team, because you've been there, you've got some personal experience that you can bring, but also engaging with them to understand what it means to them has proven time and time again to be a recipe for success in change and transformation.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you speak to people about the change that you're looking to implement, especially if you do it early on. I've learned not to try and do it too late in the process, but to do it really early on. And you'll find the people that really are up for it and they think, yeah, this is fantastic. And then there's always a group of people, your naysayers, effectively, that say, I'm not, this is awful, this isn't what we should be doing. And I tend to find actually listening to them is where I get my best insights from, because it's great to have that group of people that support you and they're really useful, but also those people that really aren't keen on that change. They might be looking at it from a perspective of, well, they might have a view that can really help you to say, well, actually, this is why I don't think this is a good idea. And it can start to make you challenge the why you're doing this.
Yeah.
If you're in a position where, in the mindset where you can accept that challenge, not be too egotistical about the work that you're doing to think it's going to improve everyone's life, but say, okay, well, let me know your thoughts on this. You might find a way to change what you're doing, still deliver and deliver a better outcome for everyone involved. So I think having that perspective of what does it mean for everyone that's going to be impacted by this change, that really helps. And like you say, it's definitely a useful perspective to have. But doing that early on, I find very helpful.
It's interesting. In previous shows, people have talked about red, amber, green people. So you've got the greens, as you say, they'll just go with it because they're quite relaxed, and then you've got the reds that are quite dismissive initially, potentially. And then you've got these sort of the people in the middle ground that don't actually know that they need to be taken on that journey. But I think that approach where you were saying of engaging with those red and amber people, and my way of looking at it is good, because, as you say, by allowing them to challenge you back and being open to that challenge, must open up so much more insight into the state of the business, what's going on at the front line. Because you might have a process. Everyone, we all have processes, but actually those documented process very rarely reflect reality, don't they? And it's getting those key themes out from the individuals can help you massively in managing that transition and managing that change.
Exactly, yeah. So the when you document a process, you don't document all the nuances that someone will go through. But also, I was on a call the other day, and this guy was presenting, talking about what they call a red team. Those people that really are that will challenge you at every single step of the way, and not just you, but the project, the program itself. And having that team established from really the get-go, and having them involved like a steering group of sorts, where the whole way through you can rely on them to give you that challenge, as opposed to, say, maybe some steering groups that you go to where a lot of the people there are champions of what you're doing anyway, so they're pretty much going to support you the whole way through and maybe challenge a little bit. But this group of people you rely on to challenge you the whole way through, to make sure that you are doing the right thing, to hold you accountable for it. And it's quite interesting, actually, because I think, had I thought of doing something like this in some of my other programs that I've led, I definitely could have got a team of red people together. But actually, I probably never brought all those individual people together in one place so they could really, come together and share all their thoughts and see the benefit in their opinion and the reason why they're challenging.
Yeah. I can think back to some of the programs I've been involved in, and some of the programs where you go to the steering groups and it's a breeze, and you come away thinking, well, that's a bit of a waste of time. And then there's other programs. I remember one probably 15 years ago now, and it was one of the national infrastructure companies, and we were making a significant investment in new technology. And every steering group, because of the size of the investment, the steering groups were every 2 or 3 weeks. So literally, you just finished one, and then you're almost planning for the next one. And there was 2 people in that steering group that if you weren't at the top of your game, you knew you were going to come out of there feeling battered in the roots. But it sort of really kept everything very tip top. It forced you to be at the top of your game when you went into those sessions, and make sure that there was no surprises. So you did all the good stuff that everyone knows you should do, but because there were those red type of people, those the people that would keep you honest almost. Then it forced you to go through that, and it just kept it at the front of your mind rather than at the back of your mind, because we all know we should do those sort of things, but it's easy to fall into the trap, isn't it?
Definitely. And I also find with those people that once you find a good way of working with them, and they start to build up confidence in you, they're real influencers as well across the organisation. And also, if they're known to present challenges, not just in those sort of forums, but just in their day-to-day work. If people start seeing that, well, actually that person's now becoming a supporter of this work, then they can start to make people think, well, I should really start paying attention to this as well. Yeah. So
they have natural followers, don't they?
They do. And with those sort of people, I mean, early stages of my career, my naivety or my lack of experience would be to try and avoid them at all costs. Yeah. But once you build up that experience, you realise that, well, 1, you can't avoid them at all costs, but 2, you shouldn't be, because they've got an opinion that's valid. Yeah. It's just it might not be, you just don't share the same opinion. But actually, if you take a step back and look at what you're doing, and then you realise, well, they generally are challenging for a good reason, then, like you say, you need to up your game. Yeah. And I find it makes you better at your job.
I agree, and I think if you avoid them and you don't confront it head on, then they will take their followers with them, and they'll go down a route that you don't want them to go down, and then
Definitely
the issue and the challenge becomes a lot bigger.
I was working with one person. I won't name them, but they were very, very challenging. From my first day, they grilled me a lot, and I couldn't find over the next half a year a way to resolve that issue, because in any email, any phone call, any meeting, they would just go for me. And just challenge everything I was doing. I was thinking, God, I was taking it quite personally, and at the same time, I was on the Managing Successful Programs course, and I asked our trainer, look, what would you do in this situation? Because I'm coming up with blanks right now. She said, just give them a call them up one-to-one and seek their opinion every time you think you're going to do something, as opposed to presenting it to a group. Speak to them first, get their thoughts, let them know that, and then they start to get to the feeling like their voice is being heard, their opinions are being heard. They're not having to fulfill the role of being the naysayer on a call in front of people, because they might not actually enjoy doing that, but they feel strongly about something that they need to say it. And actually, when I started doing that, I got such a better rapport with that person. And like you say, they do influence other people. They do have a group that follow them, and that when those people start to be brought along on the journey that you're working, they're huge supporters, and they can really make things happen.
Yeah,
so I found that was one of the biggest important lessons that I learned. Fortunately, a long time ago now.
No, and I think as we said earlier, we touched on it earlier, didn't we? About actually those lessons, those aspects that go slightly wrong or completely wrong in some cases, where you get your biggest lessons and you get your biggest successes in future, because you don't want to repeat those mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. I had something similar where I took on my first program. And it was a promotion, my first opportunity to make that step from project to program management officially. And I took it on. I was just so very, excited to take on this program that I didn't really ask, why are we doing this enough? I asked that question to start off with. I asked for the mandate and all that, and then I started to try and champion that across the organisation. But I never really asked why are we doing this? And are we doing it in the right way? I had a vision of how we were going to do it. I checked it with everyone. Everyone seemed to be on board. But I met a lot of resistance along the way. But I don't think I was ready at that point to start asking the question of myself, am I doing the right thing? Because I was so desperate to be, well, not desperate, but very excited and motivated to be a program manager and to take that step on, that I think had I taken a step back and actually really challenged the why, I could have probably created an even more successful program. It was still successful, but it wasn't. I don't think we ever truly reached or delivered the outcomes that we could have had we just stopped, paused for a second. Because sometimes when you're in that environment, you're under pressure to deliver. You need to deliver. You need to be delivering as soon as possible. So that was a huge lesson for me. A massive lesson.
And it's an important lesson, because all too often you do, and whether or not it's your first program or whether or not it's your 100th program, the challenge always is, once you've got final sign off of the business case, you're usually a number of weeks, if not months, behind schedule, and so you immediately start going headlong into implementation.
Yeah.
And the lesson, as you learned, was you actually at that stage you need to step back and really understand it and understand the rationale and the reasons why, and buy into those, because the first stage of a program manager or transformation director or someone who's leading a change, you're the salesperson for that change. And if you don't if you don't believe in it yourself and understand it completely, it's very difficult to sell that concept. And a lot of people ignore that and almost think, well, it's been signed off, so we go progress and we go follow a structure and we'll get there. Yeah, and they will get there, but they'll get their kick with people kicking and screaming along the way, and probably won't realise the maximum benefits, as you found that you could have done if you'd just taken a step back and really bought into yourself.
And I think it also, you can lose the motivation of your team, not just the business that you're delivering it to as well, but also your team that should be sharing that vision with you, motivated and empowered by that vision. And when they start having to fight the same battles that you are, it can impact that sort of environment, the project or the program environment that you're trying to create, which is collaborative and an enjoyable experience where you are delivering. And if everyone's facing challenges, then it isn't it's not a very pleasant environment, and you feel like you're fighting a constant uphill battle.
Yeah.
When actually you're meant to be delivering benefits, so it feels like it should be the other way around.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the difference, isn't it, between ideally you're in a situation where the business is pulling in the change, as opposed to what tends to happen a lot of the time, you're pushing it in, and it's much harder to push than to guide it along a path that people are pulling it into their area.
Yeah, exactly.
You just touched on something there about creating a collaborative environment. Can you just explain a little bit more about that and how you've gone about doing that in the past?
Yeah, so I've been in many working environments where it's been very much a dictatorship in sorts, where you're told this is what you're doing, and it's an environment where you don't challenge, and you just do it because that's your job, and you turn up and you need to do your job so you can get paid. But I think that working environment, or that approach to work, I've seen significantly change from the 90s and the noughties to where we are now, where people want to work collaboratively in terms of not just I'm not telling you what to do. We're going to create an environment where everyone has an opinion, and that opinion can be heard, and that opinion is valued. And when you start to do that, everyone can find different ways of solving different issues. And as opposed to me saying to my project managers and my BAs, this is how you're going to fix it, I say to them, right, this is the problem. How are we going to fix it? And the first time I did it, I remember everyone stepping back going, well, isn't that what you're meant to tell us? And I was like, well, we all have a view here, and there's more than one way to skin a cat. So let's hear your ideas. And so I think that collaborative space you start that off in your project or your program, your team, and then you invite the business to be involved in that collaboration, and then they feel that there's so many benefits from that. The business starts to feel that they're being listened to, their ideas are being taken on, and it's not just being done for the sake of doing it. Because I know in certain institutions they like to use words like we're working in an agile environment, but sometimes it's more of a tick box exercise. I think you've got to really believe in it and really foster that on a daily basis, so that it's not an environment where you're being told what to do. It's an environment where we are all working together to find the best solution. Now, sometimes that's challenging because people want to, like what we said earlier, you want to deliver quickly. And it feels like if you're always stopping to take into everyone's point of view, you might feel like you're slowing down. But the bigger picture is that it's a way of delivering a lot more benefit. And it also makes it a much more enjoyable experience. Yeah. It's much more enjoyable from my perspective when I've been in more junior roles, being asked my opinion as opposed to being told this is how you're going to do it. Because I do the job, I might know a better way of doing it. Yeah. But I remember I used to work with a guy who used to say, "Our is not to reason why, our is just to do and die." And I just thought, well, that's a really horrible way to look at work. But it was at that point very realistic. And if you are given that opportunity to reason why, then you just create a much better environment where there's trust, there's respect, but everyone's involved. Everyone can work on this thing to deliver it, and it's not an environment where I'm doing something to you, we're doing something together that improves. And that's really where I see collaboration. I don't see it as a very complex approach to working. It's quite straightforward, really, but it has a huge benefit on people. And a lot of companies that I'm working in now are starting to shift their mindset that way, which I think is fantastic.
I agree, and but I think one of the challenges that a lot of people, and that's maybe more the more traditional people, have when you start talking about running a program in the way that you've just described it, is that, well, don't we just create a talking shop then? And so how do you overcome that? How do you maintain the momentum in that change or in that program, whilst maintaining that collaborative element and that collaborative spirit within the team?
Yeah, so it is challenging, because you still have to keep your eye on the prize effectively. You still need to make sure that everything's being discussed and focused on where we need to get to. So people will inevitably go off on a tangent a little bit, go down a rabbit hole. And I think it's your role to facilitate that conversation, to set the why are we having this conversation to start with? What is the outcome that we're looking to get out of this conversation? And if you set that from the very beginning of all conversations, whether that be, just a meeting or, a big workshop, whatever it is, as long as people have got it clear that this is the outcome that we're trying to do, this is the reason why we're meeting, let's have this discussion, then it's easy enough to bring everyone back. Yeah. I always see that as whoever's chairing the call is that person that's responsible for doing that, so making sure that we come back to that place, and actually other people start to pick up on that and they can help you there as well. And as long as you've always got a clear outcome of where you want to get to, then you can avoid having a meeting where you come out of the meeting and think, God, well, did we do anything there? Yeah. What was the outcome of that meeting? I'm not very clear. So you can avoid that scenario, but that needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
All the way through.
But it's the key of saying, isn't it, right up front, as you just said there, it's every interaction that you have, be clear about the objectives and share those objectives of that meeting, that workshop, that one-to-one discussion. That there's a task that we've got to achieve, and we want to achieve that task together. Let's come together and work out the best way of going from A to B.
Definitely, and
that's what we're trying to do. We're not here to just have a nice chat or go back and revalidate whether or not the original plan or the original strategy is right or wrong. We are in the midst of driving this and delivering this, but there's lots of ways that we can go about it. So let's work out the most effective way that works for the majority of us.
Yeah. And I think with things like that as well, when you empower your team to go and have those conversations, it's just giving them some very simple tools. So I've worked in teams before, or I'm sure we've all had meeting invites that come through where there's no agenda. It just is catch up, and you just think, well, what are we here to talk about? And it's not trying to be rude or challenging to that person, but it's like, well, let's make the most out of our time. And that I find work with the team that I've had in the past. I've always said, just make sure that you're getting the most benefit out of the time that you have with this person. And also you give that person an opportunity to prepare, so that they come to that meeting ready to talk about what they want to talk about. They don't have to have the meeting and then say, right, well, I need to go away and think about this and come back and effectively have the meeting that we should have had in the first place. I always find with things like that, it's just those simple little processes that make a huge difference to your interactions with your business and the outcomes that you want to achieve.
And in your experience in the projects and programs that you've been involved in, so it's always good to talk about the successes. But I think coming back to what we were talking about earlier, it's also good to reflect on those that haven't gone terribly well. When you've done that, because I know that's a big part of your approach. Have you identified specific elements of programs or projects that you've worked on that have not been as successful? Has there been sort of one or two common issues that keep cropping up, do you think?
I think going back to what we were discussing earlier, where it's why are we doing this? Especially as a contractor, you get your new contract, you're very excited, you get in and you're there to deliver. And you might not be there to challenge why are we doing this and are we doing this in the right way? I think that's one of the key ones, but we've already discussed that. And the other for me is communication. I think communication and leadership, but I think communication is absolutely key. Just like any relationship, I'm writing an article about it at the moment, but a failing relationship is one usually where people are not communicating to each other. People feel segregated. They don't know how the other person feels, and it inevitably gets to a point where it comes to an end. And I try to look at programs and projects that I've been involved in before, where I wasn't leading, where the communication was with the business, but also with the project team, program wasn't very good. People were not being made aware of decisions, so people would be constantly frustrated that the work that they were doing is actually now slightly irrelevant, and people start to feel isolated. And when people start to feel isolated from the work, they're not really there to work with you. They're just going through the motions of being there effectively. And also the business as well, how you communicate with the business and when you communicate with the business. I've been in many programs and projects where we're delivering IT and the business are then involved gathering the requirements and doing the UAT and then implementation, and then not involved the whole way through. And I think that's a really good way of segregating yourself from the business, making it feel like you're doing something to them, and you're going to meet resistance, and actually you're probably going to deliver something that isn't fit for purpose anymore. So communicating with people early, and it doesn't need to be a new way of communicating with someone. It's just as simple as making sure you're clear on who you need to speak to and involving them right from the start, all the way through, and being as clear and transparent as you can with them, even when things are maybe not going so well. Actually say, hand up, we've got some delays here. This is the work that we're doing. This is the challenge that's ahead of us. And we're working through that, and we appreciate any input and involving the business. I think that's really key in terms of delivering that benefit, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that challenge that we talked about, with the red team. Making sure they're involved really early on, but making sure everyone's involved really early on, so that you can deliver this thing together. I see that as that's definitely been a big problem in the past. And one of the things that when I got into program management that I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to try and resolve this early on, and I'm going to do my best to make sure my team and I are talking to everyone about this in the right way, in the right format, using the right tools. So not be an annoyance, if people calling someone up every day, but doing it in the right way so that people feel involved. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, I think I wrote an article last week about a six-stage change accelerator that I developed a few years ago. And it just follows the moniker of CHANGE, and the H is honesty and communication. Because all too often, if we've got bad news to tell, we don't tell it. And in my experience and lots of experiences of other people, even when it's bad news, it's better to tell people than not. Or even when you don't know what the solution is going to be, just tell them that you don't know what the solution is going to be, but we're working through it. And what we do know is this is the approach that we're taking to understand and come to the conclusion. Because if you leave a void in that communication element, people will make up their own stories, and normally the worse stories than reality, and it can create so much noise in the organization that can be so counterproductive to what you're trying to do. The best thing is, in my experience, is to be honest in that communication and outline when you communicate, keep to that time frame, outline when the decisions will be made and keep to that time frame, and people buy into it. They might not like the message, but appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, and if you're not being honest with someone, going back to that, talking about relationships, and it is a relationship that you're trying to build up with your stakeholders. If you're not being honest with them, you're going to lose their trust and lose their confidence. Yeah. And I've worked with the regulators quite recently in a number of different programs I've been doing. And one of the firms that I won't mention, but they decided to withhold information from the regulators about a huge piece of work that we were doing, against all the advice that we were giving them to say, just be honest with them, tell them what the issue is, but tell them how you're going to resolve it. But there's this fear of telling them the bad news and then them saying, right, okay, well, something horrendous happened, and saying, well, you can't do this anymore, which isn't the case. So they didn't tell anyone. And then the regulators found out later on. And then there were bigger issues to resolve. We still found an amicable solution, but it could have been a lot less painful had we been honest early on. And I think that honesty is absolutely key. And that doesn't have to be to external stakeholders. That can be in your projects as well, just to say to people, look, this is what's happening. This is how I think we're going to resolve it. Give me your thoughts. Let me know. Am I doing the right thing here, or am I not? Because I think sometimes you look at yourself as the person to solve the issue, but you might not always be the person to find the solution, but you've definitely got the tools and the experience to know how to implement that solution.
Yeah.
And so, I think being honest is very key, and it's very tempting to sometimes not be honest because you're worried about the ramifications of letting someone know that actually, all this time and money we've invested, there is a problem, but we can fix it. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. You just raised something that I find can be misinterpreted. It can be misinterpreted quite a lot around leadership, and people think leadership means you've got to have all the answers, and you've got to give those answers and be the originator of those answers. My definition of leadership is that you've got to be a great facilitator to come up with those answers and engage with the right people so that you get the right answer. And I find in maybe inexperienced program leaders, then there is that sort of tendency that if you ask me a question, I've got to be able to provide you with the answer, and I might not know the answer, but I'll make something up because I don't want to appear to be. I don't want to be caught out. And naturally, going back to that honesty, the best action is to, I don't know, but this is what I'm going to do to find the answer.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's where leadership has changed somewhat over the years as well, of very much like, I'm telling you what to do because I'm in this position, so therefore I'm empowered and I know best to, right, okay, well, I'm in this position, but I'm here to guide you. I'm here to help us get from where we are to where we need to be. And a friend of mine was asking me about, leadership. What does it mean as a project manager or program manager? And I said, I don't think it means much different to be a leader in project and program manager than it means to be a leader in anything in life. I use the analogy of if you're out with a group of friends, you're in a bar and we need to go on somewhere else, maybe to a restaurant. You've got two types of leaders. You've got one friend that just says, right, this is where we're going, because that's generally where they want to go, and they're not considering anyone else. And you've got the other person that says, right, okay, well, gets everyone together, like he says, gets everyone to, you facilitate a conversation, you find out what everyone wants to do, and then you make a suggestion, and then everyone goes along with that. And out of those two scenarios, if I was in the first scenario, I probably wouldn't be wanting to go to the place that they're going to. I feel like it's been told that I need to go here, which isn't really what friends should be doing. And in the second scenario, even if we don't go to the place that I wanted to go to, I at least would have thought I've been considered. Yeah. I'm probably more willing to go along with that evening. And I think that's the art of being a leader, is guiding people to where we need to get to without dictating it the whole way along. And yes, you're going to have to make decisions in very challenging situations sometimes. That's part of it. But using all the information available to you is really key in being a leader. And I think it's about being a leader that people want to follow, not people, not being a leader that people have to follow.
So is that your one takeaway, do you think, then? We always end these shows with number one takeaway.
I've got so many in my head, but I would actually say believe in the change that you're delivering, because that sounds really cheesy. But, I think if you believe in the change that you're delivering, you're going to come across periods of ambiguity. And if you believe in it, you're motivated to deliver it. You're also motivated to effectively sell it to the people that you're working with and the people that you're doing that to. And you can become that champion of change, and it can be a really positive experience. If you don't believe in it, it is an uphill battle. your motivation will only last so long. And then you might come away from that experience with a lot of lessons to learn, but potentially with maybe a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth, or just something that, I did that and that was part of my career, but it's not something that you're going to jump up and down and say, look at this amazing thing that I did. So I think if you're able to really pick those pieces of work that you believe in delivering, so that would be my takeaway.
And that's a great takeaway, because as you say, you'll be able to look back on your career and there'll be specific things then that you are very, very proud of. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Adam. It's a fascinating conversation as always. Thanks for your time and your insights. We occasionally get questions. Are you happy to answer any questions that come in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, any questions or any feedback? Happy to field them.
Super. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Tony. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Adam, I can't believe that we're 40 plus minutes in. The conversation has just flowed. Once again, thank you. As I mentioned at the start of the show, Adam recently joined the Transformation Leaders Hub. If you haven't checked it out already and you operate in change and transformation, why not? The whole focus of TLH is to help its members to stand out, to provide a platform on which to build their reputation, expand their network, and ultimately to attract new career opportunities to them. We have a core objective to be instrumental in delivering $100 million worth of opportunity into the membership within the next 10 years. We have recently launched the TLH mentoring program, so if you think you'd benefit from working alongside an experienced transformation leader, please do get in touch. Also, please do subscribe to the podcast and leave us your feedback. I will always respond to you, and I know my guests would be delighted to explore things further with you. See you in a couple of weeks.